Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to have a look at another collaboration beer. So this one is half Danish on the home side, half Norwegian on the away side. Both of the breweries involved in this one have featured on the channel before, albeit the Danish one quite a bit more than the Norwegian one, mainly because of their age difference, and it is also a little bit harder to get Norwegian beer here in the south of Sweden. But when it comes to these breweries, I would say the Danish one is best known for the different kinds of IPAs, and also for their big Imperial stouts, and they've done a good few other things too. But when it comes to the Norwegian brewery, those guys are a bit newer, and they are probably best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs. So the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style that I know the home brewery can do very well, and it's also the first time I'm trying a beer from this end of the spectrum, if you like, from the Norwegian brewery, so it should be really quite interesting actually, and it is a little bit of a monster, I have to say. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to, for the home side of things, we are going to cross the Øresund and go to Copenhagen in Denmark. We're going to go to Kastrup in the south of the city, and we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Amager Bryghus. So this particular beer is called Macabre. It comes in at a monstrous 14.2% ABV. It's an Imperial Stout, and this is brewed in collaboration with Salikatt Bryggeri, who are from Stavanger up in Norway. So yeah, this should be pretty interesting. Quite a recent release, this one, and it is supposed to be pretty damn good. So let's crack on and see what we have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the breweries involved here before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done, both from Amager Bryghus and from Salikatt Bryggeri. We will no doubt add more to both of those lists at some point in the near future, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and you can of course go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on geography, your hometown, state, whatever. Use that and you will find hopefully beers from your local area. You can also check out the playlist of beers from different countries, and you'll find this one in both the Danish and the Norwegian playlist, and those are being added to quite regularly, although the Danish one a bit more than the Norwegian. But anyway, let's go on to my brewery notes and chat a little bit about the different breweries then. So we'll start off with Amager Bryghus, since they are the home brewery in this case. So, as I've mentioned to you already, Amager Bryghus are based in Kastrup in the southern part of Copenhagen, the Danish capital on Sjælland, the easternmost of the Danish main islands, and these guys are probably one of the best known Danish craft breweries outside of the likes of Mikkeller and Toul. They were one of the first ones I discovered when I moved over to Scandinavia back in 2015. But the brewery was established back in April of 2007 by two friends, Morten Valentin Lundsbach and Jakob Storm, and these guys had been avid homebrewers for a number of years. But they were old school friends, and they are Amager natives, of course, which is why they decided to name the brewery as such. But apparently in school they were forced to do a chemistry and physics project together, and so they wrote about the fermentation process that went on in beers. And that just kind of stuck with them over the years. But they felt their native area of Amager needed its own brewery, and both actually went on to gain their brewing diplomas from the Scandinavian Brewing School, part of Copenhagen University, back in 2008. And the company has since gone on to become highly decorated. But the first brewery that they had was located in Tornby in the southern part of the city, and they've been constantly expanding over the last few years. They had to buy a whole new brew kit in 2011, which took their brewing capacity up to around 250,000 litres of beer per year, but in the original facility they managed to get it up into the region of 400,000 litres per year. But they moved to a new site closer to the airport in 2018, which doubled their capacity, and they opened up their tap house bar in Copenhagen next to the Nørreport metro station in March of 2019. And then soon after that, they got the opportunity to take over another bar in the Amager area. This one is called Bryggen, and I believe that opened up either in late 2019 or early 2020. But yeah, as of November 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 345 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And like I said to you, these guys are known for doing lots of different IPAs, but also for their big Imperial Stouts. And you'll find, a few other things in there. They've got a few series of beers. The Seven Sinners series was always a good one, and they have been rebrewing those recently. The American Outlaw series is always quite interesting. Big bomber bottles. barrel aged sort of things. But yeah, some of the classic beers that I would recommend from this brewery: the Herr Fredriksson Imperial Stout. The Bastard Princess was a really nice New England IPA, the very first one they did, batch 100, and at the moment it's winter, so they've got the Winter in Bangalore IPA, which is always pretty damn good. But yeah, definitely a Danish brewery that you need to check out if you get the chance. But that's everything we need to say about Amager Bryghus. If you want to learn more, check out the brewery website, follow them on the usual social media, and you can, of course, check out the Untappd page to learn more about all the different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's go on to the Norwegian side of things then, and up to Stavanger. So Salikatt Bryggeri, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Stavanger in Norway, and the company was founded back in 2015 by Bjarte Halvorsen along with his wife Tonje. So Bjarte is a long-time home brewer, and he trained as a mechanical engineer at NTNU, which is the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, but eventually his hobby took over his time and he decided that it was about time to become a professional brewer. So he worked for a number of breweries throughout Norway from about 2013, and this includes Lervig, Torn, Bakke and then Kim. But to fund the brewery, Bjarte and his wife sold their house, and pretty much all of the money that they made from this went into building up the company. So apparently all they had left was his wife's bunad, which is, you know, the Norwegian traditional dress, the sort of yeah, it kind of goes down to the ankles and it's sort of white, and usually they're quite colourful actually, they're pretty cool things. But yeah, that was all they had left was Tonje's bunad. But the first brewery the brewery that they have now is based in Hillevåg in the south of the city, and they started brewing in this facility back in 2016. But over the coming years, they started to grow, and in 2017 they produced around 30,000 litres, and then about 45,000 litres in 2018. And that was also the first year that they actually turned a profit. But that year, they also opened up their on-site bar, and Alexander Idland joined the brewing team as well. And they've just been kind of expanding more and more since then. But the name Salikatt actually comes from a local curse word which can be used to express anger or irritation, or actually a pleasant surprise as well. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. So it must be a little bit like saying fy fan in Swedish. But as of November 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 165 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And yeah, they are known mainly for their different New England hazy IPAs. I did see that they had recently released a West Coast one for Christmas, so I will need to see if I can get that in Copenhagen actually the next time I head over there. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Salikatt Bryggeri. So again, you can check out the brewery website if you want to learn more. You can follow them on the usual social media, or of course you can check out the Untappd page to learn a little bit more about the different beers that they've done, or you can check out the other 2 reviews I've done involving this brewery. But as I say, I want to do more Norwegian reviews for you on the channel in the future, and Salikatt Bryggeri, it would be cool to try a few different styles from them, but we know they do some very good New Englands. So yeah, that's everything we need to do with the brewery history. Let's get on and actually have a look at the beer itself. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one again. Once again, you can see Simon Dalgard's lovely artwork in there, Macabre. It says a double mash Imperial Stout, which we have had actually from Amager Bryghus before, and we do have the classic Amager blurb on this one. Plain black top on the can there, as we can see, but yeah, it says on the side of this one, on the surface, little Howard lived a happy and protected life in a wealthy New England family, but in reality it was a grim life ridden with horrors and nightmares not really suited for a small boy. When he was only 3, his dad was committed to the local psychiatric hospital, where he died 5 years later. Only many years later would Howard learn that his daddy had died from late-stage syphilis, but in many ways, Granddaddy Whipple would be the main father figure in his life. So when he also died, when Howard was still in his early teens, Howard's life pretty much collapsed, and the financial collapse in the family's life that followed tore him completely apart. His mother Susan, known for her rich, beautiful dark hair, was a nervous lady. Having lost both her husband and also her father, she turned even more nervous, becoming overly protective towards little Howard to a degree where he developed his own nervous tics. Maybe it's no wonder that Howard would develop an interest for the occult and the macabre, an interest he brought into his writings. These genres, however, made him neither fame nor fortune as a writer, and when Howard died at only 46 years of age from his writing, only a decade later, would he be celebrated as one of the most original authors within fantasy horror fiction, well, pretty much anything macabre. Had he known that a psychedelic rock band would take his name, and that his hometown of Rhode Island would dedicate a memorial square to him, Howard would probably have laughed. one of his very rare laughs. This beer is a collaboration made with Salikatt Bryggeri from Stavanger in Norway. So yeah, that's pretty interesting actually. Yeah, Howard Whipple. I need to have a little look at that. I'm not, I haven't read books in a long, long time, I have to say that. But yeah, quite an interesting story there. And I do like that, how Amager, they always put a little bit of time into these blurbs, of course. But yeah, this one, the hops in this one, it's got talus in it, which should be quite interesting. We know this hop quite well. 14 or so, no, 16% American, 16% alpha acid American hop usually gives you a sort of pinky grapefruit kind of thing, but with also a little bit of coconut. The malt base in this one is Pilsner, Cara Munich, number 2, Crystal T50, and then roasted barley, chocolate, and it also has brune farin in it, so should be quite interesting. But yeah, a 14.2% Imperial Stout, named after Howard Whipple, the American author, I guess. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see what we have. Really looking forward to this. Been a good while actually since I've had an Imperial Stout from Amager Bryghus. We had the Nosferatu quite recently on the channel, of course, and that was actually really well done for a lower ABV Imperial Stout. But of course, Amager do have the double black mash, if I remember the name correctly, and that is quite a well-known beer. They often age that in different barrels and things, and you can see it. But anyway, there we go. So, before the head completely disappears on this one, and the head isn't going to hold, of course, because it's 14.2% ABV, and it doesn't have wheat in it, this one either. But yeah, you can see when this beer poured, it had about a quarter finger of a frothy, I would have said medium, kind of medium beige head, but that has of course faded away to be a nice kind of just a little ring around the edge of the glass. The top of the beer is almost like pretty much just flat black. But yeah, in terms of the colour of this one, you can see it is pretty much as black as you're going to get. A lovely dark ebony sort of rosewood colour. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do, or any adjuncts that you put in, will affect the colour of the beer as well. But when it comes to black beers like this, it's very difficult to change the colour of the beer with adjuncts and things like that. You can do it sometimes with barley wines and so on, but yeah, it does look pretty nice, this one. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the surface there. And if we shine the light through the beer, you do get a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi Max coloured edge, a little bit of that chestnutty type thing as well. But, it does look pretty damn nice, I have to say. Nothing surprising about it though when you consider what style it is. I think we should have a wee look at the aroma and see what this beer has in store for us. So let's do this. I've never had talus in an Imperial Stout before, so it should be interesting. Oh yeah, that does smell pretty nice. I'm going to say straight away, nothing surprising about the aroma, but it just smells really, really good. Yeah, I mean, straight away with this one, you get that lovely big kind of oily you get that lovely big sort of oily sweetness to it, definitely. You've also got a bit of the kind of roasty toasty character in there as well. But yeah, the way that it goes together, I think, is pretty damn nice. You get a nice little bit of sweet, oily fruit from this beer as well. But yeah, let's try and break that down for you and just describe the aroma a wee bit more in depth. So yeah, backbone of the beer, you absolutely get a little bit of that kind of roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust. You would expect that. On top of that, there are 1 or 2 little woody characters to it, a little bit of nuttiness. But to me, I'm getting a lot of, like sweet rye bread. Definitely getting a good little bit of that out of it. But at the same time, it's almost like a kind of brandy-soaked fruit bread, something like that. It's kind of that sort of vibe that this beer is given, definitely. So I really like how, I do really like how that goes together in this one. The aroma of this beer, it's quite, it's kind of like an old, I think this one is definitely going to be a kind of more old school Russian Imperial Stout, to be honest with you. Amager do like the kind of more old school Imperial Stouts, I think that's definitely fair to say. But for me, this one, you've got that big, on top of that sort of, cakey, brandy soaked fruit loaf type thing, you do have a little bit of a sort of muffiny a muffiny chocolate brownie type note to this beer. It does have a bit of a cakey backbone to it. There's definitely some kind of chocolatey character to the beer. So maybe like a sort of 70-ish, 80% cocoa, but further forward on the nose you do get a little bit, further forward on the nose you do get a little bit of a kind of sweeter, more milky chocolate, you know, a sort of 40% cocoa type thing. So yeah, I do like how that goes together. Yeah, aroma wise, it is pretty nice. There's a lot of brown sugar in this one, of course. You get that big, highly caramelized, treacly molasses sort of thing. This one, you know, it's kind of interesting. I don't think this beer has had an overly long wort boil, because one of the things you can always tell with Imperial Stouts, if the brown sugars come across as like really leathery and things like that, that usually is an indicator that the beer has had a longer wort boil, because you get, you know, the more you get those more kind of leathery and highly caramelized sugars coming out of the beer. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together for me is really nice. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, aroma wise, this is pretty damn awesome though. I do like how this goes together. Absolutely. But yeah, on the other than that, yeah, the maltiness, yeah, as I say, a bit of treacle molasses, a little bit of sweeter caramel, and then, you know, the further into the nose you get, the more that you smell it, you start to get a few kind of drier, more woody and nutty elements out of it. I don't know if there's anything else really that we need to say about that, but yeah, the more and more that I smell this beer, it gets that drier, sort of woody, almost almondy, cashewy type thing out of it. So yeah, that is pretty interesting. Yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the malty side of the beer. So on the hoppy side of things, you know, you can obviously at 14.2% you can age this beer a good little bit if you want to. To be honest, I'm kind of surprised that they didn't put this one into. I don't know how much they actually bottle now, but I'm kind of surprised they didn't bottle this one and maybe put like a wax top on it or something. They might do a barrel aged version or rebrew it, you know, something like this. You never know. But yeah, the one with it, the thing with this, obviously the longer you leave it, the more the hoppy character is going to drop out. But you certainly do get a little bit of earthiness out of this one at this point. That I'm drinking this beer, it is pretty new. I think it says it's best before the 10th of 2025, so it will have been canned in October, of course. So I'm drinking this beer when it's only been released about a month or something. But yeah, you do get a little bit of earthiness in there. There's a little touch of kind of grassiness and floral character. They're quite wet and obviously not too prominent in the grand scheme of the aroma. But yeah, the hoppy character, there is a little bit of it there. It will of course drop out the longer you keep this beer. But when it comes to the fruity side of things, it's quite interesting because you do have. I'm getting quite a little bit of black currant out of this one. There is of course a little bit of figgy character, and you have that more oily plum and things like that. But you are getting a little bit of that sultana-y, datey, more dry fruity character in the aroma of this beer as well. So yeah, but I would say the fruity notes are not overly pungent for me in this one. This beer is more. It doesn't have, I will say, you actually have to search for these things I'm describing a little bit. This is not the most pungent of aromas that you'll get from some of the Amager Bryghus stouts. But yeah, it does have my interest. I'm sure it'll be packed full of flavour. So as I always say, take a wee bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we have a taste of this one. So yeah, this is the Macabre, a 14.2% double mash Imperial Stout from Amager Bryghus in Copenhagen in Denmark, in collaboration with Salikatt from Stavanger up in Norway. So let's get stuck into this. Slange, skål, cheers. Oh yeah, that's pretty interesting. So I'm going to say straight away, this beer, it is absolutely it's one of these ones where in the beginning when you first take it in, you're like, oh okay, and then it actually really mellows out. This beer is one of the ones where you should focus on the aftertaste a little bit more and the flavours that come out in the aftertaste, but it's very, very nice. My first impression of it though, it's a big, silky, smooth thing though. Yeah, it's big, silky, smooth Imperial Stout. Has got a little bit of the RIS character to it, but it's actually, yeah, it's more kind of smooth and silky, and it's got quite a bit of brown sugar and stuff to it as well. Not a lot in the way of hoppy character, of course. Yeah, this isn't quite what I expected actually. It's interesting because the smoothness you're getting out of this one, it kind of reminds me of the mouthfeel of the Salikatt New Englands in a way. It's kind of got the same sort of smoothness, and maybe that's what they're trying to incorporate into this beer. And with it being a collaboration, that would make sense. But it's actually, as I say, it's not really kind of what I expected. But it's a nice beer, so I'm going to say well done to both Amager Bryghus and Salikatt for this. This is a beer that's going to make me think a little bit because the flavours, as I say, take a wee bit of time to come out. And I would say, if I was tasting this blind, I would actually think that this beer was potentially barrel aged. I mean, we've reviewed the two beers that this reminds me of. One of them was quite recent. We reviewed it was the Emperor of Time from Amundsen in Norway, and then a bit before that, what was it called? The Stig Bergets one with the lion, the big bourbon barrel aged Imperial Stout. It had quite a simple name, but yeah, if you like if you like that, the Stig Bergets Imperial Stout with the lion, and if you liked Amundsen Emperor of Time, this beer is actually quite similar to those. This one isn't barrel aged, of course, but to me, it almost just has a little bit of that barrel aged character because you get the kind of the backbone of the beer feels a little bit barrel aged. You've got the kind of silkiness and smoothness in the middle of it, and yeah, it's almost like a slight. To me, I think if I was tasting this blind, I'd probably say it was like a bourbon barrel aged Imperial Milk Stout or something like that. It really it's an interesting beer. This one, as I say, very, very smooth and silky Imperial Stout. Let's try and break this flavour down a little bit and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth, actually. But that is my initial impression of this one. It's this beer. You have to focus on the aftertaste a little bit more with it. So yeah, middle third of your palate then. The backbone of this beer, you've almost got like a smooth, oaky, woody backbone in there. So yeah, a little bit of smooth, oaky, woody backbone. On top of that, you get the kind of roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust. You do get a little bit of that. But then as you move toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you've got a little touch of a kind of, as I say, there's a little bit of a kind of pecan, almondy, nutty type quality there, and it's quite interesting from that perspective. But yeah, on top of that, you start to get the big bready notes out of this beer. So you've got this really dense, almost like stick above the well fired bread crust. Above that, you've got the nice kind of dense, sticky. Yeah, you have that nice sort of dense, sticky, sort of rye bready type quality. So yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is really quite nice. And then above the kind of more sticky rye bread, you start to get a lighter bready layer, and that's the kind of one that I was talking about. That's like a kind of brandy soaked fruit loaf, something like that. So you can feel that you've got the well-fired bread crust, the sort of more sticky rye bready type quality. It's almost a little bit cakey in a sense. You almost get this kind of oily sort of cakey type quality, and then above that you get the kind of more fruit loafy, brandy soaked fruit loaf type thing. Above all of that, you start to get the chocolatey side out of the beer. So toward the back of that middle third of your palate, toward the back of that middle third of your palate, you'll start to get, the sort of, it's almost like a 70% cocoa chocolate. It's verging on dark chocolate, but it's not madly far that way. So you've got about 70%. You've got about 70% cocoa chocolate in there, and then as you move further forward, you can feel it gets a little bit smoother and brighter and things like that. And then eventually, when you reach, you've got a kind of gradient there. Remember, more bitter and darker flavors come out further back on the palate. But as you move further forward from that, you start to get a more, you do start to get a little bit of a more milky chocolate. It gradually moves over to like a sort of 30-40% cocoa chocolate, more of a milky type chocolate actually. So yeah. So yeah, the way that goes together is pretty damn nice actually. Yeah, in terms of the kind of brown sugars, then the brown sugars sit above the kind of chocolatey layer in this beer. It is kind of like in a big circle, so you can feel the base layer of that circle is a sort of leathery type thing. This beer is double mash, and that's what's giving you a lot of the silkiness in the mouthfeel. But I was talking about this earlier, with the wort boil, you can feel a little bit of the kind of leatheriness of the brown sugars that I was talking about earlier. So if you go, we'll work our way down with the brown sugars. You've got this big circle in the middle of your palate, and that's where all your kind of brown sugars are coagulating or whatever. So in the dead centre of your palate, you get that nice big kind of treacly molasses thing, and you can feel it sort of mellows out and sweetens up a little bit as you move out from the centre of your palate. You get a bit of a straight up caramel after that, and then as you move toward the extremities of that middle third of your palate, that's when you get a little bit of the more, that's when you get a little bit of the more kind of leathery sort of base to it. So yeah, I do, as I say, I quite like how that goes together for sure. It's really interesting from that perspective. Mm. So the brown sugars, as I say, sit on top of that nice kind of chocolatey base, and they become a bit more prominent the further you go into the aftertaste. As I say, it's an interesting stout, this one. It's kind of old school in a sense, but it really does remind me of the Emperor of Time and the big the Stigberry, it's Lion Stout kind of thing that they did. It really is quite similar to that, this one. So an interesting beer for sure. And it's definitely not as roasty and toasty as a number of the other Amar ones I've had in the past. Herr Fredrickson, which is obviously one of my favourites, is an big old school roasty toasty Russian Imperial Stout, and the double black mash, the one with the wolf on it from Amager Bryghus, is definitely a bit more roasty and toasty than this. This is almost a bit more like a kind of, to me, as I say, if I was tasting it blind, I'd think it was a bourbon barrel aged milk stout, something like that. So, although in fairness, that's the one thing with this beer. In the middle of your palate, you'll notice that you get the more woody and kind of slightly nutty flavours coming out further into the aftertaste with it. But yeah, we've covered the middle third of the palate. That's the most complex part of the beer. Let's go to the back third and then the hops and stuff. So the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build up in there. It is a little bit cakey, a little bit almost chocolate muffiny, kind of something like that. But the base of the back third of the palate, again, you get a bit of that drier wood in there for sure. Above that, you get a little bit of the kind of rye bready sort of thing. The layer of bread above that on the back third of the palate for me is more like a wholemeal brown bread, rather than being the sort of soaked, brandy soaked fruit loaf thing that I was describing earlier. So yeah, woody flavour, a little bit of the roasty toasty, well fired bread crust, then the the rye bready notes, and then the kind of more wholemeal bready notes. And those layers are, of course, all a little bit taller than in the middle third of the palate, and above that you start to get the kind of yeasty notes out of the beer. So let's just focus on those for a minute. So yeah, the more kind of yeasty notes that you get out of this beer, it is a little bit more of a kind of fruit cake. It's got a little bit of that kind of fruit cakey, Christmas puddingy type character to it. So that sits above all of the. It does sit above. It sits above all of the. It sits above all of that. Um, and it's kind of it has a little bit of that more airiness, a little bit of sweetness and stuff to it, like a kind of caramel wafer. So yeah, you've got that more it just Christmas puddingy, caramel wafery sort of thing, and that sits above everything else. But as I say, on the back third of the palate, the flavour is definitely taller, and then as you come further forward, it just squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, quite a bit of interesting stuff going on with the malty and yeasty character in this beer. But let's go on to the hoppy side of things then. There's not too much to report on the hoppy side, incidentally. A little bit of earthiness in the back corners of the palate, but then as you move further forward, it's a little bit herbal, and as you push further forward, you've got more of a kind of you've got like a wet floral character, and then a little bit of wet grassiness around the front curve of the tongue. The green component in this beer is not overly prominent. I will be very, very clear on that. It really isn't overly prominent at all. But yeah, let's look at the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of the beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, a little bit of bready build up in there. You do have a little bit of that kind of chocolate cakey, kind of brownie muffin like character there. You can feel that. Then the base of the front third of your palate is absolutely a more kind of, you know, chocolate brownie, smooth, woody. You've got like a woody base and then a little bit of that kind of chocolate brownie, muffiny type base there. And on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where the fruity esters roll their way out of the beer, and that's what we're going to look at now. So let's do that. So when you take this beer in, you do get a little bit of like a kind of pruny character out of it. There's a little tiny hint of a raisiny sharpness in there, but under that, for me, it's like a dried plum, a bit of prune. And then if we're talking about the back half of that front third of your palate, you start to get that datey, pruny, dry, fruity character in there. So raisin, prune, little bit, raisin, prune, a little bit of a more kind of datey kind of character underneath that. As you move further forward into the middle of that front third of your palate, you get a little bit of a you do get a little bit of a more figgy note out of it. Then as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, you start to get other characters out of it too, which I think are quite interesting. You start to get a little bit of blackcurrant underneath there, and then on top of that you get a little touch of just blackberry that lingers into the aftertaste, but you get quite a dry blackcurrant. So the base, as I say, is a more kind of datey kind of character, a little bit of sultana as you move into the front half. You've got that kind of dry fruity base, but then on top, yeah, bit of raisin, bit of prune, and then into the front half, a little bit of blackcurrant and blackberry. I think that describes the fruity character of this beer quite well. But yeah, it is pretty damn interesting in that regard. As I say, this is one of these beers where none of the flavours are overly pungent. It just kind of, it's one of, it's just kind of how everything kind of fits together, and that's kind of what makes the beer. But yeah, further into the aftertaste, a bit more woodiness, a bit more cakiness, and things like that. It really does, as I say, remind me of Emperor of Time from Amundsen, and the Lion Imperial Stout from the Bourbon Barrel Aged one from Stig Bryghus. So if you like those beers, you will like this one, pretty sure of that. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the flavour. Let's round off with the mouthfeel. We've kind of talked about that through the tasting though. Definitely a full-bodied beer. Carbonation is very, very smooth. It's actually quite a big silky, kind of silky but slightly slick mouthfeel you get out of this one. IBUs, that's a bit hard in this beer. I really don't find this one overly bitter. I think it's maybe about 40-ish IBUs at the most. It's actually very smooth and kind of sweet Imperial Stout. It does have a bit of dryness to it, so you have to be careful not to conflate the dryness and the bitterness in this beer, in fairness. But the malt base, as we said, dry underneath, kind of smooth and kind of sticky in the middle, but a bit of sweetness and chocolatey character from both the brown sugar and chocolatey side of things on top. You've got a lovely little bit of fruity character, both oily and sweet, but a little bit dry at the same time. And just a little touch of hoppy character as well. But yeah, not an overly bitter beer most of the You've got a little bit of roasty toastiness in the malt base, as we said, but yeah, not overly bitter, but more kind of smooth silk and kind of savoury Imperial Stout, actually. So yeah, really interesting beer, this one for me, and really cool to see Amager Bryghus and Salikatt do something together. But yeah, enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this. I could feel the booze going to my head a little bit, so I think we should end this review there. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are, both from Amager Bryghus and from Salikatt. We will return to both of these breweries at some point in the near future. My first Imperial Stout from the latter, of course. But yeah, it was pretty damn awesome. So check out my social media, check out Amager and Salikatt's social media. We'll return to both of these breweries very soon. The Macabre 14.2% Imperial Stout from Amager Bryghus in Kastrup, Copenhagen, Denmark, in collaboration with Salikatt Bryggeri from Stavanger in Norway. See you guys very soon. Cheers.